All right, so today we're diving into the war in Ukraine, and it's a heavy one.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It really is, and just looking at all these sources you sent over, I can tell you've been doing a lot of reading.
Oh yeah, I've been diving in deep.
Yeah, and it seems like we really want to get beyond those headlines that we see, every day, and really try to understand
The background,
yeah, like the historical
the
roots,
context.
yeah, all the political pressures, the cultural factors.
Everything that goes into this, it's not just this, sudden explosion.
Right, exactly. And looking at these, I mean, you've got stuff going back centuries.
Centuries, yeah.
So clearly this isn't something that just sort of popped up overnight.
No. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, so, our deep dive today, it's not about picking sides. It's not about saying who's right or wrong.
Right.
It's really about trying to understand, how did we get here?
Yeah, how did this conflict come to be? What's the story?
What's the story? And it's fascinating because, like, a lot of the sources start with this idea of a shared heritage.
Right.
We've got the Kievan Rus,
Yes.
this medieval state that was really powerful, and it laid the groundwork for both Russia and Ukraine.
Exactly. I think that's a really important point to start with, is that, these two nations, they come from the same place.
They do.
They have this shared history.
And in a way, it's like, brothers or siblings
Right.
fighting, and that's kind of what makes it even more tragic in a way.
It really is.
But, as your sources from Source Name point out this shared heritage, it's a source of connection, but it's also
Become a point of contention.
yeah, like it's almost been weaponized in a way.
You could say that, it's like this shared family history that's now being used to kind of, justify certain actions or to create divisions.
Right. And we see that throughout history, right? I mean, if you look at, any conflict, often there's this shared history that's then used to
divide people.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that Ukraine went on to forge its own distinct path over centuries, culminating in its independence when the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. That's huge, right?
Massive, yeah.
I mean, that's a key turning point, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, imagine living through that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The collapse of this superpower, this empire.
Yeah, and suddenly you're your own country.
You're on your own.
Yeah, figuring things out for the first time in a long time.
And Ukraine, really emerged from that and started to try to define itself, as
an independent nation.
As an independent nation, yeah. But as we see in Source Names analysis, independence, it didn't mean that everything was suddenly hunky-dory.
No, of course not.
There was still a lot of challenges, a lot of complexities. And one of the things that a lot of sources focus on is the presence of a large Russian-speaking population within Ukraine, particularly in the east. And Crimea.
Right. And that's a significant factor that we can't overlook.
Yeah. How did that play into things?
Well, it kind of fed into a narrative that Putin has often used. He sees Ukraine as being part of this historical sphere of influence for Russia. And the fact that there are so many Russian speakers in Ukraine, strengthens that claim, in his eyes, at least.
Right.
And then when you add in Ukraine's westward leanings, particularly the idea of it joining NATO, that's when things get really tense, because Putin sees that as a direct threat to Russia's security and influence. He said it many times. He's talked about NATO expansion as a betrayal and a move against Russia's interests.
It's like their backyard. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And he feels like, the West is encroaching on their territory, on their historical sphere of influence.
And it's in this context, this historical baggage, this demographic complexity, that 2014 becomes such a pivotal year.
Yeah, 2014 is really when things start to escalate.
Right. You've got sources here detailing the protests that led to the ousting of a pro-Russian president in Ukraine and the installation of a more pro-Western government.
Right, and that's when Russia makes its move.
Yeah, they annexed Crimea.
Which, as we've discussed, had a predominantly Russian-speaking population, so they kind of had a justification, at least in their eyes.
Right.
And then simultaneously, you see these pro-Russian separatists in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. And they start this conflict, and it's widely believed that they're backed by Russia.
So it's like a proxy war.
Yeah, exactly. A proxy war that simmers for years,
Right.
It's this frozen conflict that never really goes away. And then, it sets the stage for what happens in 2022.
The full-scale invasion.
The full-scale invasion, exactly. And I think it's impossible to ignore the role of Putin's ideology here. You've got this whole stack of articles that dive into his worldview, his beliefs about Russia's place in the world.
Right. It's not just about, territory, resources.
No, it's about something much deeper. It's about history. It's about identity. It's about this idea of restoring Russia to its former glory.
And, this concept of Novorossiya comes up a lot in your sources.
Right.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So Novorossiya, it's a historical term. It refers to a territory that encompasses much of modern-day Ukraine. And Putin has invoked this term in his speeches to justify Russia's claim on these lands. It's like he's saying this is historically Russian territory, and we're just taking back what's rightfully ours.
Right. And so he frames the invasion as a special military operation.
Yeah. Demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. That's the language he uses.
Right, but the global community reacts very differently.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the world sees this as a blatant act of aggression, a violation of international law.
An invasion.
An invasion, plain and simple, and the response is swift and strong. You have the U.S., the EU, many other countries imposing these severe economic sanctions on Russia, targeting their banks, their businesses, their oligarchs, trying to cripple their economy.
Right. And at the same time, they're also providing military and financial aid to Ukraine.
Exactly. So you have this kind of global standoff, this proxy war playing out on the world stage, and every country has to kind of pick a side or try to navigate this really delicate neutrality.
And then there's the human cost.
Right.
Which is, just absolutely heartbreaking.
It's devastating.
You've included some really powerful personal accounts here, stories of people who lost everything, their homes, their families.
Yeah, and there are reports from organizations like the UN, the Red Cross, detailing the scale of the destruction, the displacement, the loss of life. It's just immense.
And the impact, it goes far beyond Ukraine's borders.
Right.
Ukraine is a major grain exporter.
Yeah.
And this conflict, it disrupts global food supplies.
Exactly. So you have all these knock-on effects.
Yeah.
Food prices are going up. There are shortages in some parts of the world. And the sources you've got from SourceName, they really highlight how this is affecting vulnerable populations.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect that touches everyone in some way.
And it's easy to get lost in the politics, the military strategy.
The geopolitics?
Yeah, but we have to remember that at the heart of this are real people.
Right, real people whose lives have been turned upside down.
Whose lives have been shattered.
Yeah.
So, looking at all this, we see this intricate web of history and politics and culture and economics.
It's all intertwined.
Yeah, and your deep dive, it really highlights how complex this conflict is.
There's no easy answers.
There are no easy answers. And I think that's something that's really important for us to remember. We live in a world where everything is so polarized. It's so easy to just, pick a side and demonize the other.
Right.
When you really dive into something like this,
you realize it's so much more nuanced.
It's so much more nuanced than that. Yeah.
There are so many factors at play.
So many perspectives.
And there's no easy solution.
There's no easy solution.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the conflict is ongoing. The path to peace, it's riddled with obstacles.
It's a long road ahead.
It is a long road ahead. So, as we wrap up here, I want to leave you with a question.
Okay.
Given all that we've uncovered, the deep historical ties, the geopolitical realities, the human cost, what possibilities do you see for a path towards peace in Ukraine?
That's a tough one.
It's a tough one, yeah.
But it's one that we all need to be thinking about.
And hopefully these sources, they've given you some food for thought.
Some different perspectives.
Some things to consider.
Yeah.
And, maybe it'll inspire you to learn more, to get involved, to do something, to try to make a difference.
I hope so.
Because ultimately, peace, it's not something that just happens.
It's something we have to work for.
It's something we have to work for, yeah. So let's keep thinking, let's keep talking, and let's keep searching for that path towards peace.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been enlightening.
It has.
And to all of you listening out there, thanks for joining us, and keep those questions coming.
Yeah, we love to hear from you.
Until next time.
See you then.